crunch. By the time the kids were done washing their hands, supper was ready. Mothers swore by it, not because it was gourmet, but because it filled the belly fast and made use of whatever was left in the pantry. Sometimes they'd add onions or a pinch of sugar if they had it. Most didn't. But here's what's wild. This humble little crumble didn't just feed hungry mouths. It taught people how to stretch nothing into something, how to make 5 minutes feel like a miracle. And that's just the beginning. Most nights, it was served straight from the skillet, placed right in the middle of the table like a trophy. No plates, just spoons and hungry hands. For kids who'd spent the day hauling coal or picking beans, that salty tomato steam meant comfort. Some even remembered the sound of those crackers crackling as they soaked up the juice, like a promise that bedtime wouldn't come on an empty stomach. And while city folks might have turned up their noses at a meal this plain, out in the countryside, it was survival food. It was dignity. It was love in 5 minutes flat. Years later, grown men would tear up talking about it, how something so simple could mean so much. 2. Emergency egg hash. This one came from the back page of a 1942 wartime homemaker's guide, printed when meat was rationed, gas was tight, and nobody had time to peel potatoes for breakfast. Housewives called it emergency egg hash, and it was the kind of thing you could make in a panic when company showed up uninvited or the kids came home starving. You'd take stale bread, torn, not sliced, and toss it in a greased skillet with whatever scraps you had. Maybe a spoonful of onions, a bit of bacon fat, or a chopped pickle if you were lucky. Once it browned, you'd crack in a couple eggs and stir like mad for 90 seconds. No fluff, no flipping. It wasn't pretty, but it was fast, hot, and surprisingly good. The trick was in the scraps. Some folks swore by a splash of vinegar to cut the grease. Others tossed in sauerkraut juice for zing. It was different in every house, but the goal was always the same: make something out of nothing and do it before the kettle boiled. School kids used to call it pan scramble and race home hoping Ma hadn't run out of eggs that day. And here's the kicker. Years later, after the war ended and the rations lifted, some families kept making it, not because they had to, but because they missed it. That smell, that sound, that skillet slap. It was survival turned into tradition. For a lot of folks, that egg hash wasn't just food. It was a memory burned into the walls of tiny kitchens. The clang of the cast iron, the hiss of bread hitting hot grease, the soft thump of an egg cracked one-handed. It was rhythm. It reminded people that being broke didn't mean being broken, and that 5 minutes could still taste like home. But there's one 5-minute recipe even faster, and it came from inside a moving train car. 3. Railroad bean mash. This one wasn't written in a cookbook. It was passed around by word of mouth from train car to train car during the 1920s and 30s. Hobos, porters, and traveling workers all knew it by different names: bean mash, hobo spread, freight car lunch. But the recipe stayed the same. 1 can of beans, 1 heel of bread, and whatever seasoning you could pocket or trade. You'd heat the beans right in the can, over a lantern, a firebox, or sometimes just a scrap of burning newspaper. Once it was warm, you'd smash stale bread right into it with the back of a spoon, stir like crazy, and add salt, pepper, or even mustard packets if you were lucky. That was it. 3 minutes, tops. Hot, filling, and portable enough to eat on a moving train with one hand. To outsiders, it looked like slop, but for the men riding the rails, it was gold. They'd trade stories, pass cans down the line, and teach newcomers how to stretch 1 can into 2 meals. Some even carved recipes into boxcar walls so the next traveler wouldn't go hungry. It wasn't just food, it was community in a can. Quick, quiet, and shared without question. And here's what's strange. Many of those men later settled down, started families, built homes, and kept making the same mash. Not because they had to, but because it reminded them of when they had nothing, and still shared everything. Years later, grandkids would find those same cans stashed in sheds or basements. not for emergencies, but for memories. And if you ever asked an old-timer why they still ate it, they'd just smile and say, "Because it got me here." But there's one recipe that never left the house. In fact, it was so secret, only the women in the family knew it, and they could make it blindfolded. 4. Whispered milk gravy. You wouldn't find this one in magazines or even most cookbooks. It lived in memory, passed quietly between mothers and daughters, scribbled on the inside cover of Bible pages or on the back of flour sacks. Folks just called it milk gravy, but it was more than that. It started with a dab of saved fat in a hot skillet, bacon grease if you had it, lard if you didn't. Then a spoonful of flour, stirred fast until golden. Finally, in went the milk, a splash at a time until it thickened into something creamy and smooth. No measurements, no timers, just instinct. Some stirred in a pinch of pepper, others a splash of coffee or vinegar to cut the richness. It was poured over boiled potatoes, leftover biscuits, even canned vegetables when meat was scarce. It wasn't just a sauce. It was a way to turn not enough into plenty, the kind of food that fed big families with empty wallets. Every woman had her own rhythm with it. You could hear the scraping of the spoon, the quiet hum of concentration as she worked that pan like a dance. It wasn't flashy, but it was sacred. And when you tasted it, hot, thick, and just a little salty, you could feel the years of practice in every bite. Some nights the gravy was the whole meal, not a topping. A wide bowl, a ladle, a shake of pepper, and a spoon for every kid at the table. Folks said you could tell a home by its gravy. Thin when times were lean, richer when payday came, always hot either way. It tasted like care more than cream, like someone stayed standing so you could sit and eat. And just when supper seemed done, some mamas would reach for one last thing in the fruit bowl, an old apple, and toss it in the same skillet to stretch the comfort just a little further. 5. Brown sugar apple rings. When the gravy bowl scraped clean, some mothers went right back to that hot skillet and made dessert out of almost nothing. One apple, sliced into thin rings with the peel left on, slipped into a little butter or bacon grease. A quick dust of brown sugar, maybe a pinch of cinnamon, and a tiny splash of vinegar to wake it up. 2 minutes per side and the sugar turned shiny and glassy, the apple softened, and the kitchen smelled like fairground pie. Folks laid the rings over leftover rice, or spooned a ribbon of milk around the edges so the syrup could run and sweeten every bite. Most nights there was only one apple to go around, so the knife did careful work. Thin slices meant more smiles. Kids learned the sound of just right, the soft hiss when sugar met heat, the little lift of a fork when the center wobbled but didn't fall apart. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like a small party after a hard day. You didn't need plates either. A shared bowl and warm spoons were enough. On winter evenings, those rings could change the air in a house. The coal stove ticked, boots dried by the door, and tiny crystals of steam fogged the window where someone had traced a heart last week. A father might flip the slices with a pocket knife because the spatula went missing, and a grandmother would tap his wrist and say, "Gentle now." The sugar clung to the apples like stained glass. A child would hold one up to the lamp and see gold shine through. And for 5 sweet minutes, the whole room got quiet. Not because there wasn't more to do, but because this was the part worth pausing for. And when apple season ended and the fruit bowl went bare, that same hot skillet met something tougher than fruit. A bitter backyard green folks fried when money got tight. 6 dandelion greens. Fry-up. When apples ran out and gardens slept, folks turned to what grew for free. Dandelion greens weren't for show, they were supper. You'd snip a bowlful from the yard before the flowers opened, rinse off the grit, and drop the leaves into a hot skillet with a spoon of bacon grease. They wilted a splash of vinegar to calm the bite. 2-3 minutes, done. Bitter, bright, and strong enough to stand alone or sit on top of a potato to make a full plate. People joked it tasted like hard times, but they kept eating it even when paydays got better. Grandmothers said the greens wake the blood. Field hands said it kept a man on his feet. Kids learned to judge the heat by the shine on the leaves. Too dull and you'd overcooked it, too wet and you hadn't given it fire. The pan told the truth, and so did the first bite. Spring mornings had a rhythm to them. A coffee can for cut greens, a cold tap to rinse off the yard, a skillet already warm from frying breakfast scraps. The kitchen window cracked open, you could hear a train far off and smell damp soil coming in. Someone would day's bread to swipe the skillet after the greens slipped out, catching the last of the salty fat. An uncle might brag he could spot the tender leaves from a porch away, and a neighbor would trade a jar of vinegar for a bowl of cooked greens on Sunday. No recipe cards, no timers, just eyes, hands, and a stove that remembered. It pops and sizzles like hail on a tin roof. Blink, and supper's done. And when the dandelions were gone and the yard went quiet, the skillet didn't rest. It turned to a pantry staple with a funny name and a quick temper, hominy that jumps when it hits hot fat. 7. Hominy quick fry. Hominy was the quiet hero of lean nights. You'd drain a can, blot it dry so it wouldn't sputter, and toss the kernels into a hot skillet with a spoon of bacon grease or butter. They'd blister and puff in minutes, crisp outside, tender inside. A hard shake of salt and black pepper, maybe a pinch of chili or paprika, and you had a bowl that ate like a meal. Some folks slid a fried egg on top. Others scraped the pan straight to the table and didn't bother with plates. The sound was half the joy. First a soft hiss, then sharp pops like gravel under a truck tire. Kids crowded the stove to watch kernels jump, and somebody always caught one on the wrist and laughed. The smell turned nutty and warm, with a little smoke if you'd scraped the bacon tin clean. Old hands swore you could tell doneness by the shine. Too thick, too wet, and you hadn't given it heat. A quick rain of chopped onion at the end made the whole kitchen smell like Sunday. The beauty of it was how fast it turned nothing into something. A tired mother could fry up a can while a baby cried on her hip, and the others banged forks on the table. It didn't need tending, just a watchful eye and a brave hand. You could bulk it with breadcrumbs, mellow it with cream, or spice it with hot pepper if someone had brought a bag home from the corner store. Even the old men liked it, soft enough to chew, strong enough to stick. You'd finish your bowl, wipe your lip, and still smell the butter on your shirt an hour later. Folks didn't write poems about hominy, but they sure remembered it when the shelves ran low. And when the skillet was still blazing, the quickest two-can supper in America was next, corn and lima beans flashing together in one bright, hot minute. 8. Flash succotash skillet. This was the fastest hot plate a tired cook could make. 1 can of corn, 1 can of lima beans, both drained quick, straight into a smoking skillet with a spoon of bacon grease or butter. Stir hard for a minute, add a pinch of salt and black pepper, maybe a thumb of chopped onion if it's handy. The corn goes sweet and toasty, the limas turn soft and creamy. 2-3 minutes and the whole pan shines. Some folks hit it with a splash of vinegar or a dot of sugar to balance the bite. Others dusted paprika for color and called it done. It wasn't company food, but it was proud. Mill workers ate it before the night shift. Kids ate it after ball practice. You could scoop it beside eggs, over potatoes, or right onto a plate with a pat of butter that melted down the hill like summer. The sound was a soft scrape and hiss, the smell sweet and green. If the pan was hot enough, the corn popped like tiny fireworks. Saturday kitchens moved fast when this showed up. Someone would crack the window, let in street noise and a little cool air, and that skillet would talk, first a whisper, then a steady sizzle. A father might tip the broken, not pale, just glossy and full. A grandmother would reach past him, pinch a kernel, and nod without smiling. Approval given, lesson learned. You could stretch the plate with a crumble of yesterday's cornbread or full meals in just 5 minutes. No timers, no shortcuts, just grit, grease, and a hot pan. These were the dishes that got America through the Great Depression, blackouts, and back-breaking days. But most, completely erased from today's cookbooks. So we dug deep, back through the oldest recipe cards and grease-stained pages to live. They're fast, they're frugal, and they just might save your grocery bill in 2025. 1. Skillet tomato crumble. This one came from a 1930s church basement cookbook in Indiana, a side dish so quick you'd think it was a snack. But for broke families back then, it was dinner. All it took was a hot cast-iron skillet, a can of stewed tomatoes, and a handful of crushed saltine crackers. Folks would toss the tomatoes into sizzling lard or bacon grease, stir until bubbling, then sprinkle the crackers right on top. No cheese, no herbs, no fancy nothing, just heat,